Welcome to the webinar, Connect the Dots, Sonos Achieves End-to-End Supply Chain Visibility. I would like to introduce both of our presenters for today. Vivian Zhang is a Sourcing Operations Analyst at Sonos. In her role, Vivian has led the cost management platform development, implementation, and process optimization to deliver efficiency across the organization. She's been with Sonos for 3 years, bringing 5 years of experience in the cost management field, including a background in both financial management and supply chain. Our second speaker is Ed Lewis, CEO of Verizon. With over 20 years of experience leading design, development, and marketing of S&OP and supply chain solutions, Ed launched Verizon to help companies realize greater value from their supply chain planning initiatives through a holistic and agile approach. Prior to Verizon, Ed was VP of Product Marketing at Steel Wedge Software, and before Steel Wedge, he was CEO of Amativ Inc. I will now turn it over to Ed to kick off the discussion. Ed, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Tricia, and thank you everyone for tuning in today and your interest in Anaplan and the Sonos story using Anaplan. We're happy to share that with you. In today's agenda, we're going to address the key areas of what has made Sonos successful in achieving end-to-end visibility. We'll lay a little bit of groundwork in terms of what their supply chain looks like and the related complexity of their supply chain. It's, as we all know, it's often like planning on a moving target. We'll talk about, and Vivian in particular will cover the sourcing challenges of her organization and the solution that they've deployed and the benefits it's providing within sourcing. We'll then go to supply-demand balancing and talk about the challenges and solution there with the supply-demand balancing, and then move on to supply and capacity planning solution. We'll end with the key takeaways from this initiative. So first, a little bit about the Sonos, about Sonos themselves. I'm sure many of you are quite familiar with Sonos, the home sound system provider. These many of us on this call probably have those in our home and understand the powerful value it provides for Wi-Fi sharing of sound and streaming music within the home, and the control that it provides. For me personally, the absence of wires after I've spent so much time wiring speakers was particularly attractive for the Sonos approach. But as you can imagine, as a consumer electronic product, there's a shorter life cycle for these kinds of products. Of course, they are complex, and with Sonos, the smart speakers, the smarts in each one of those speakers comes from internal electronics that allow them to talk to one another and to be controlled across the Wi-Fi of the home. And so there's a lot of complexity in those internal electronics, not to mention adjust the speakers themselves. And along with a pretty aggressive new product introduction schedule, it makes managing a global supply chain particularly challenging. And so let's look a little bit at the particulars, the metrics of the supply chain itself, or at least a description. Sonos is global. Sonos sells their products in each of the markets around the world, and sells through multiple channels. You may have seen their online store from which all their products are available, but also, and to an increasing degree, available through retail and through distributors. So in that market, developing the demand plan and then translating that into inventory positioning is the challenge that the planners in each one of the regions around the globe are faced with. They have distribution centers, multiple distribution centers in each one of the regions that are distributing products that are mainly produced in China plants. As I said, they have a pretty aggressive new product introduction schedule, so this is always a moving target, and new products take up, of course, a lot of the bandwidth of a supply chain planning organization. On top of that, they have a complex multi-level bill of materials that are required in order to translate to properly plan and to translate the component requirements to their manufacturers. Many of these can be long lead time items, and changing the plan for those items can have direct consequences in availability of product in each one of the markets. As a strategic initiative, Sonos also has quite a focus on developing second source, or really alternate sources for each one of the components. We're going to talk about that. And as a matter of fact, in this next section, Vivian is going to explain how we have applied Anaplan to assist in sourcing and cost management within her organization. And so with that, I will turn it over to Vivian.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you, everyone, during the session. I would love to share my user story, what's going on and what happened in Sonos as sourcing team, and how Anaplan helped us to actually optimize and connect our data and actually trigger a lot of more collaboration between cross-functional teams. So before we even started to talk about the challenges that we have at Sonos sourcing team, we want to share at sourcing operation team what we do and what we actually provide to our sourcing team members. That for a lot of the things we do, we provide the cost management reporting and like KPI tracking to our global sourcing managers. We report on our the COGM, which is the cost of goods manufactured. Also, we support our CM sourcing to do the quarterly price validation process. So as you may know that there's a lot of data that we're dealing with. The first thing that why we want to introduce Anaplan to help our daily work, that's because first thing we wanted to get rid of all the manual work that I used to do. And also this sourcing model is actually lay a foundation for a lot of future features that will build in. And as you may know, that all the planning activities we've done, like Ed will actually introduce more for the planning models that Sonos implemented into Anaplan. It's majorly focused on the finished goods level forecast, but sourcing model is actually the model to bring everything down to manufacturing part number level. That ultimately you should be able to see if we change like 15% on the demand side, then what's the shortage we're gonna see on the manufacturing part number side. So this is what we're trying to do. And for the challenges that we had as Sonos sourcing team is that we used to have a pure Excel-based cost management process and with all the manual work there. And it was time consuming because all the manual process that we need to download, upload, and manually consolidate all the spreadsheet together. It was time consuming, and also it was hard to get all the data validated because all of them was just in the Excel spreadsheet. And it left us just teeny tiny time to do deeper dive. And if there's something wrong, we can't get the troubleshooting done within the very short period of time. And also we had really low data integrity between teams. Normally we just take the snapshot from other teams' members' data, but the data is never real time. Also, we tried to implement other system before Anaplan, and it turned out to be like a black box. Although we know what data we imported into the tool, but we don't know actually what's coming out because although it's designed per Sonos requirements, but still, I feel like the logic there behind, and at the end, it's just a little bit out of control. So that's the reason why we introduced Anaplan to our sourcing team and help with our daily operation. And that's actually where we start to see the connection and between it can be internally between cross-functional team within Sonos or externally that we connected to our, for example, PLM system, that's the product lifecycle management system, that we can automatically sync up the bill of material on weekly basis. And internally, we have the real time, the finished goods component, finished goods volume projection that's on the weekly base refresh. And also we have the component forecast, which is on a weekly base refresh as well. Also with the MSP, which is the Sonos model, that we connect to the data provided by our contract manufacturer to automate the price validation process that we have. So MSP, the sourcing model that we have at Sonos, actually connected all the dots that we have. So I'm really, really proud of this model right now. And we're gonna talk about, so the optimization, the solutions that we implemented there. So now we have the automated process, we have the real-time sourcing strategic spend and saving planning for both at both material and the COGM level. Also, we have the real-time, the finished goods level plan and component requirements with improved accuracy. Also, the component forecast can be published to our key suppliers directly from Anaplan. And with all of this optimization that we had, I would say from sourcing ops, only this one department that we used to on monthly base dealing with maybe more over 100 spreadsheets before, but right now we're just only dealing with a couple of them, very few of spreadsheets that we're working on right now. And for the time saving perspective, I would say it at least saved a couple of days within a month for all the sourcing analyst team. And I'm showing you a process flow that we had before. And for this one, you can see that all the green spots there, they're all the manual process we had before Anaplan. But with the Anaplan, we should be able to see that the new process flow that we have a very faster process right now within a shorter timeline. Also, there's other optimization we did as sourcing team. So we actually built in a lot more data diagnostic functions within Anaplan to enable self-checking to make sure that we have more data accuracy during the daily operation and avoid the human error as possible as we can. Because as sourcing team, we maintain the price quotes, allocation, the supplier name, manufacturer part number, and then there could be the human error, like if there's a space in between, so that's gonna cause problems. So the data diagnostic functions will give us a lot of improvement on the daily operation right now. Also, we get the full visibility across the whole company right now, from the planning to a teeny tiny manufacturing part number component, and we enabled one source of truth. That's a really good thing, and we're really proud of the sourcing model also for other Sonos models. So now I will transition.
Thank you, Vivian.
Thank you, Ed.
Yes. So one of the things that I think is really impressive about the sourcing model, the sourcing app that Sonos has deployed. As a global organization, the sources of data exist in multiple different places. The PLM, the different teams are collecting quotes and different aspects, and all of that needs to be rationalized and, of course, to a point that we can actually project what the requirements are using the price quoting and bills of materials. And that error checking really does help tremendously to enable that, right? What formerly were offline Excel spreadsheets. So Now, what Vivian was just talking about was built on a foundation, as she said, of the production plan, the ex-factory plan in Sonos' case, as to what finished goods products are planned to be built in order to meet demand. And so let's go into that solution, and actually, as a first step, let's talk about the roadmap that Sonos has been on and the important characteristics of this roadmap. So we have gone from supply-demand balancing through supply and really capacity planning, material spend, component forecast, and we are now on component visibility, and we'll talk about that a bit. But typically what happens in companies' initiatives to solve these problems or to automate these processes is that there's an elaborate selection process, and very often not any one provider it can provide a single solution for each one of these, not to mention the compromise that each one of those solutions might bring to their own internal processes. And one of the important things that Sonos found after they did a quite extensive, really spanning multiple years, trying to find a vendor that could provide and a platform that could provide the solution that fit their business, was that there was too much compromise for the way they do business. You know, their DNA, the way they do business is what has made them successful, and they didn't want to abandon that or compromise that. And the Anaplan platform allowed them to reflect their own processes at the same time, on a case-by-case basis, adopt some best practices rather than what was coded into the software when it was developed. We started with the supply-demand balancing application to get, and we're going to talk about this one and the supply planning here in a minute, but we moved from phase to phase, each one building upon the success of the other, building upon the information from the other, with a seamless flow throughout each one of these applications. So the amount of planning alignment is really tremendous within this collection of applications. So let's start with the supply-demand balancing first. And the headline here and what Sonos was after was the ability to give a commitment back to the channel as to what product was expected to be available in each one of the regions around the globe. They had some difficulty, and a bunch of smart people trying and working long hours every week in order to do that, but still, they had multiple plans, they had multiple versions, they had data that needed to be assembled from various data sources. Many of them didn't quite reconcile one to the other, at least in the way they could get the data. And so it was difficult, time-consuming, and ultimately the composite was a plan that didn't have the level of confidence that they wanted. And so what ends up happening, as in all organizations, is they begin hedging against that plan. And so it really isn't the most efficient plan or true plan for the organization. On top of all the time that they spent to assemble and put together plans and reconcile these plans, they had a weekly C-level meetings that they needed to provide reports for management to understand what decisions needed to be made and what the current state of products and where they stood with new products, etc. And the amount of preparation for each one of those meetings it took up, much of the week, and that meant that there wasn't a lot of time left over for the analysis and the the process improvement or continuous improvement for exploring what better options were available. Inevitably, in the C-level meeting, then some executive is going to say, what if we did this, one of the plans that hadn't been contemplated? And so now we're back to the drawing board, and the Sonos team was in the next week trying to put together the impact of that, the scenario that the executive had suggested. And with each day that goes by, that plan becomes more stale, and the effectiveness of that plan is diminished. And Sonos wanted to change that. they wanted to create a supply-demand balancing solution that in one application from the beginning of their planning cycle on a weekly basis allowed them to access the consolidated and validated information for them to reflect their constraints in that plan, to have a plan recommended to them as a starting plan, and then enable the global planners to adjust the levers that they would ordinarily adjust: planning capacity, the SKU mix for going into each one of the markets and ultimately coming from the factory, the targets in each one of the days of supply or days of inventory, and even transportation mode levers. So can they fulfill the demand by accelerating delivery shipping via a accelerated mode into that market in the 1 week or 2 weeks in which there's a gap? And so that is the solution that we built for Sonos for supply-demand balancing, provided each one of those levers and an environment for the global planner to begin planning on day one. And what's happened is that has become the single source of truth with that automated data collection. And the kind of questions that we have now, or that Sonos has, is not which plan is right, but what does Anaplan say? Because Anaplan has now become the single source of truth for their planning data, certainly around their requested ex-factory production plan, and as we started off, the commitment back to the channel as to what's going to be available. So the next phase of the project that we moved on to was the supply and capacity planning. And here we're doing more finite capacity and taking into account the constrained components and the impact on the ability to produce those products during that component constraint. And so, as you can imagine, their ability to take into account both finite capacity that's available given the actual and specific calendar and holiday calendar for their contract manufacturers, and reflect the idiosyncrasies of each one of the manufacturers, and take into account key component constraints where there might be shortages for a particular white version or black version or whatever that is, and reflect that into what is going to be now a commitment back to the channel. That was very difficult for them to do and very difficult to reconcile. And so again, we had a level of hedging that was going on because they couldn't tell precisely what that was, and no one would be able to. Couldn't tell precisely, and so there was a bit of hedging and perhaps under-promising to each one of the markets. And so their confidence in the commit plan and the accuracy drove them to look for an alternative to bring improvement there. And then on top of that, they wanted the ability to then translate this plan, this finite plan, into a signal to their contract manufacturers for the new week for which they needed to issue the purchase order and really production instructions, as well as to their logistics providers as to what the number of containers that were going to be needed for that next time period. And at the same time, look out further. So given now the new forecast, or the new production plan, I should say, what is the expectation going out forward for finished goods production and logistics requirements? And so we created the capacity and supply planning solution that gave them these levers. And so they're taking into account standard and premium and holiday capacity, the component supply. We can't build white ones for 3 weeks because of some shortage. So we need to concentrate on the black ones and absorb our capacity using the black ones, and then we'll build the white ones. Or maybe we're pre-building in earlier periods where we have a capacity constraint so that we have enough so that we can fulfill the demand. And all the while rolling that into rolling that into the container sizes that can actually move. So we don't want product that is being produced and then just sitting on the dock because it's a half a container and we're not going to move a half a container. So all of that was built into this planning application. And so one of the beauties of Anaplan is that when they're ready for the plan, then that information flows seamlessly back into supply-demand balancing and provides the final commitment back to the channel. So the first one is a rough cut, is supply-demand balancing and rough cut capacity planning. And here, this is a reflection of actually constrained production, and it illustrates or commits that product back to the market. At the same time that we are pushing that back to supply-demand balancing, we're generating purchase orders out of purchase order signal out of Anaplan, which is sent to the ERP system to develop the formal document, which is then sent via EDI to the contract manufacturer. And we're communicating the shipping container plan, both near term and longer term, to the logistics provider. And so this provides a level of seamlessness and visibility and precision that Sonos was looking for. So now, at the end of the day today, and of course we are continuing with the supply chain visibility portion, and that phase of the project continues. But today, from supply-demand balancing through committed and constrained production, through communication with their manufacturers as to their component forecast and what the requirements are, as well as communicating the financial dimensions of the production plan, what that means in terms of revenue, as well as what it means in terms of cost and possible savings. Sonos now has, for all of those functions, an intuitive role-based planning dashboards that they can interact with. So it's no longer in Excel, it's live, it's in the Anaplan solution, and it's tailored for individual roles, giving them the information they need to support their decisions. Importantly, they are able to plan starting day one. Monday morning, they walk in, the data is collected, they are ready to go. So they're not spending that time reconciling or trying to collect the data. And so as you can imagine, the alignment between the plans, so now Vivian's group is no longer guessing what the production plan is, and nor is there risk that the production plan is out of date, because it flows directly from the supply-demand balancing and ultimately from the capacity and supply planning. And likewise, the publication of the exploded bill of material based component forecast out to the manufacturers is based on real production and real bill of material. And so there's not an approximation anymore. They're communicating the real requirements. The collaboration across a global organization, as I said, there are planners in each one of the regions, and they are able to plan using Anaplan seamlessly, all using the same information. And so their plans are recommended, and they can collaborate amongst one another in a way they simply couldn't before. And where for those roles that are responsible for generation of the forecast or PO publications or logistics forecasts, those are now issued at the click of a button. And so when they're ready, then they initiate the publication of those to their trading partners, and that way they keep their trading partners in the loop. And that, of course, minimizes the gap between the gap between the trading partners, but also minimizes the amount of hedge the trading partner has to put in place in order to support Sonos. So a few key takeaways is the next section, and here's ones that we would offer for companies that are looking to start on that transformation roadmap and to begin improving their performance. As I said, very often it takes a very lengthy process to understand requirements and go out and try to find the right solution for the organization. That all certainly is required, but we don't have to boil the ocean. And in fact, the companies that we've seen successful and to translate their improvement initiatives into tangible results are those that get started on the transformation roadmap, target the high impact functions, and then choose a solution that works that will target those. And of course, if you choose a solution that can then be extended to meet your requirements in your future areas, then of course that's the best. But you don't have to have the entire roadmap mapped out. In other words, we don't need turn-by-turn instructions in our trip across the country to understand where we're going to turn in New York. We just need to know we're headed towards New York and what is the first step that we need to, the first leg of that journey. We're going to learn things along the way, and we may even change our course along the way. Demonstrating success is vital, and that builds momentum that carries to the next priority. We saw that with, for example, with Sonos. The supply-demand balancing success created momentum, which rolled into the supply and capacity, which rolled into material spend, and so on. So often we see these kinds of initiatives get stalled because the success is marginal, or it isn't what was expected, or there's the budget to extend it now becomes more complicated or bigger. And so choose wisely and demonstrate success in the early sections that will carry and drive the next priorities. Retaining company-specific processes is really important, and then use best practices to increase value of the solution, not the other way around. Very often with canned software programs that are built around ostensibly best practices, that means that's the way the software provider thought you ought to run your business, and conforming your business to that really can compromise adoption through the organization. And very often that's what drives it even more off-system Excel spreadsheets to do what the system isn't designed to do. With a solution like Anaplan, retaining company-specific processes, retain the DNA, the company's mode of doing business that made them successful, and then where appropriate, adopt best practices. Increasing user adoption it is key to any one of these initiatives. If the folks that are making the decision aren't able to use the solution, or don't trust it, or don't understand how it works, then adoption is going to be low, and then the solution ultimately is going to be, they're going to find a workaround or not use it simply at all. And so one way to improve that is to invite the key participants into the implementation process and provide transparency during that process with, for example, an agile approach, so that this is mutually developed, so that they have a hand in the development of the solution. They understand how it works, and it's not, as Vivian said, just a black box that's handed over at the end that the folks might not have been their first choice for that type of solution. And then finally, we would recommend that in today's rapidly changing supply chain, is not just today, it's been that way for the past certainly 15 years or so, the changing business conditions, continuous improvement initiatives really mandate that the technologies is able to adapt to the learnings, to the evolving organization. And to the extent that requires very expensive, time-consuming changes to the technology that underpins the organization, then basically it's not going to get done, right? So it becomes a significant budgeting initiative. So make sure that at least at some level, the business users can make those changes to conform to changes in their business conditions. And then even if it does require a little bit of additional expertise, make sure that the platform itself lends itself to rapid change rather than requiring re-implementation or recoding of the application. Those are the key things that we would recommend for as takeaways. And I think we may be, maybe right on time. So here we are, that's the end of our slides, and we have, I think, an opportunity for a bit of Q&A. So Tricia, I'll turn that back over to you.
Great, thank you, Ed and Vivian. We're now going to answer the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. So our first question from Rick is Sonos able to flex capacity to ramp up quickly in case of demand surge?
I think I'll take that one. And so the short answer is yes. And so those kinds of variables are built into the capacity planning model. And to the extent there is a surge in demand, then, for example, in this Sonos case, the availability of overtime or premium or even holiday pay or capacity and the related costs that were associated with that, the need to the extent those portions were maxed out, the ability to then revert to pre-build scenario and even ramp additional capacity in those situations were all part of the capacity and supply solution. And so the powerful thing that describes the solution that reflected Sonos requirements, but to the extent the customers have other levers that can be moved in order to address a surge capacity, then those can be modeled into the solution. That's one of the very powerful things about the Anaplan solution.
Great. And here's one for Vivian. Could you give us an example of how you work with contract manufacturers to align on the supply and demand to serve the global requirement? Vivian?
Hi. Sorry, just mute myself.
Yeah.
There's a lot of interaction between sourcing team and contract manufacturer, but Ed, do you have any input from your side?
Yes, so that in that supplying capacity, and so I'm sorry, Tricia, we were talking about alignment with contract manufacturer to the plans, right, in collaboration?
Yes.
Yep. And so yes, in the capacity and supply model or app, the middle one that we were talking, or the second one that we were talking about, the output there is both the purchase order that I mentioned, which then commits to the next week in lead time, but then there's also a forecast that's published at the same interval that gives the contract manufacturer the visibility to the final production plan. And so then the global plan, or the production planners, or supply planners in Sonos case, as they're called, will collaborate with the contract manufacturer to make sure that that's in line with their capacity, and if there are any issues. One of the future areas that is targeted is an actual live collaboration with the contract manufacturers inside of Anaplan, which would then enable them to commit to each one of the plans and to a soft horizon going out beyond the fixed lead time. So that's the way that they're collaborating on finished goods. Some of the components also are procured by the contract manufacturers, right? So even the component forecast is relevant to the contract manufacturers because they're actually ordering from the manufacturer on behalf of Sonos and stocking those parts at the levels that are needed to support production. And so that level of collaboration is also done through the component forecast publication. So, and let me just follow that by saying that the level of visibility, both in finished goods production as well as component requirements for the contract manufacturer and the manufacturer for that matter, is, of course, they had been providing forecasts before, but the frequency, the accuracy, and the confidence that the contract manufacturer and manufacturers can have now in the forecast is just ratcheting up every day. And so what that means is that we're taking those of us on the call that are concerned with the bullwhip effect and hedging right along the way, we are taking steps with every new app in reducing that bullwhip effect and the efficiency of the Sonos supply chain.
Okay, great. We're getting a lot of questions. So I'm not sure if you, and does the supplier collaborate and commit to the forecast?
Vivian, is the supplier committing back to that manufacturer's forecast?
Yes, they do.
And
Okay,
and let me just follow on that. One of the areas that I didn't talk very much about, let me go back here, and that's this key component visibility. Within Sonos, there are long lead times items, just like with every product, and it's those items that really are critical to the ability to flex the supply chain to, either capitalize on upside opportunity or to trim back in the case where demand isn't following through. So visibility here is key. And so this is the next project. In fact, we've already created a prototype for this model, and this collects information from the suppliers really on the supplier's inventory and the supplier's even WIP on these long-term items. That brings that into Anaplan so that we can understand the position of the customer, of the manufacturer. And as we flex demand, we want to understand where do we run into the shortage first. And we're actually looking inside of the manufacturer's facility. So this project is in work, and of course there's a collaborative effect, or dimension to this as well, where they're actually doing the commitment.
Okay. So we have another one here. What is the timeline for supply demand planning? 12 months or 3 months? And how does this plan get translated to the financial plan for S&OP? I think you talked about that. Maybe this is a clarification.
Yeah, so the horizon here, of course, it changes as we roll into new years and so on, but it's basically at a minimum of 15 months in supply demand balancing. And then so all of these downstream plans are similar kind of horizon. And this ultimately is driven by the annual operating plan and then reconciled here in supply demand balancing to the annual operating plan. And then the Sonos there's another track that is concerned with elevating this plan up into the longer term plan that goes out beyond 15 months, the S&OP plan, and that is still a future application for Sonos.
Okay, great. So that's about all the time that we have for questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will address it offline via email. So I'd like to thank you, Vivian and Ed, and thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Connect the Dots, Sonos Achieves End-to-End Supply Chain Visibility. You will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar, including a slide share. Thank you again and have a great rest of your day.